and the topic of the UFO and UAPs has been front and center since 2017. Today, what we're going to be doing, we're going to be discussing the UAP issue, but we're going to take it a little bit further. We have Jack Sarfatti, Dr. Jack Sarfatti, with us. Jack is waving hello to everyone. He has done yeoman's work. He and his team and compadres are doing a lot of work discovering what the Tic Tac phenomenon is all about. Just to recap a little bit, the Tic Tac, it was how Commander Fravor, U.S. Navy commander and pilot of an F-18, he and his wing person were chasing a Tic Tac object, or several of them actually, and it was described, and this happened back in 2004, and it was while the aircraft carrier Nimitz was on operations, training operations, about 100 miles southwest of San Diego, its home port. The area of San Diego, for those who may not be aware of it, UFO activity goes back to 1905 when a sighting took place on a U.S. Navy ship out of San Diego that was called the Supply. There was a young ensign on board who actually reported this event. They had 4 objects flying over the ship and taking off going up, defying any type of physics related to meteors or that type of phenomena. So anyway, it's not anything new, and it's been going on for years. Actually, the story got out around 2005, 2006, but the Navy actually certified it in 2017 when they released the footage of the FLIR, forward-looking infrared, and the gun camera footage. That kind of put it into an interesting category, because now it's a type of disclosure that a lot of people in the industry or in the movement have been looking for. So with that little bit of background, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sarfatti. Jack, you mind if I call you Jack?
Go right ahead, of course, yes.
Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Jack now, and Jack is going to pick it up from there, and he's going to share a lot of information that most of us have probably never heard before, and you're going to walk away and say, wow, this is really interesting. Jack, all yours.
Okay, thanks. I must say that basically I've been in this since I was a little kid. The Army recognized me as a sort of, I guess, a smart kid, and my grandfather was working for the Army. This is back in the late 1940s, probably around 1949, 1950. Yes, only a few years after the Roswell, 1947, and I was actually part of what seems to be now an Army experiment with bright kids to get us to go into science. And I'm pretty sure, although I met Phil Corso at that time, I was about 10 or 11 years old, as part of this project. I can't be certain it was Phil Corso, the guy who wrote The Day After Roswell. And in any case, then when I was in middle school, pre-high school, I was part of a government project out of Columbia University that was financed by Eugene McDermott. Eugene McDermott was one of the founders of Texas Instruments. He was part of the Wild Bill Donovan OSS, team in World War II. And again, it was a kind of a project, to encourage us to go into science. It was after school, went throughout high school, and as a result of that project, I was sent to Cornell when I was about 17 years old to work with the people like Hans Bethe, Nobel Prize physicists. These are the people who built the bomb at Los Alamos. And at the time, my parents were divorced. My mother would send me $20 a week. Everything was paid for, basically by the government. And in any case, I was an assistant professor of physics at San Diego State in the late 1960s, early 1970s. And some of this story is in the book by MIT professor David Kaiser, How the Hippie Saved Physics, and others are in a book I wrote, Destiny Matrix. But to make a long story short, I was basically recruited sort of undercover in a way by the CIA people and the Defense Department people in the early 70s to work. They said, Jack, CIA wants to know two things. How does consciousness work? They mean physically. And how do flying saucers fly? That's what they want. And basically for the last 50 years, since the early 70s, that's the two problems I've been working on, and with a group of other people. And since the disclosure from the Pentagon in December 3 years ago or so, I now think, quote, so to speak, without sounding too much like President George Bush, mission accomplished. What I mean by that is we now have a solid understanding, conceptual understanding in terms of mainstream, battle-tested theoretical physics of both problems. What consciousness is as a physical mechanism. This ties in with the paranormal, of course, the whole paranormal high strangeness feature of the UFO phenomena, and how the UFOs fly. And it turns out that the physics of it, the understanding of it is actually pretty elementary. Any like second, third year physics undergraduate at MIT, Caltech, or any of the good universities, if they still exist, I hope, can understand the physics of it. It's not difficult physics. It's not M theory or string theory. It's just basic Einstein general relativity, quantum mechanics, solid state physics, thermodynamics, non-equilibrium statistical mechanics, standard stuff, and of course metamaterials. And so the basic phenomenon is understood at all angles. But let me say one other thing, and then I'll stop and let other people talk. When I say we understand it, it means conceptually we understand it. It doesn't mean we know how to go into the laboratory and engineer the stuff. And let me make a comparison. Back around back in the late 30s and at the beginning of World War II, every physicist understood the possibility of an atomic bomb. The basic physics of nuclear fission was worked out in the early 1930s by Niels Bohr with John Wheeler, who I worked with to some extent, and Lisa Meitner, a Jewish woman physicist actually in Berlin, I think, in Germany, before Hitler really, clamped down on the Jews. She did the first kind of demonstration of nuclear fission, so that everybody knew this. All the physicists knew this. What was difficult was the engineering of it to actually refine the isotopes of uranium, design the trigger mechanisms, which is what my professors at Cornell did. And that's what took all the money and took all the effort. We're in the same situation today. We know that these craft are flying around. And I believe Christopher Mellon when he says they're not ours. Now, Christopher Mellon, he should certainly know because he was Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence for many years. And he's, Mellon from Carnegie Mellon, the Andrew Mellon family. And I agree with that. They're not ours, but whose are they? Now, I think I know who's where they're coming from, and we could get into that later. But the thing is, they exist. We know they exist. We understand the basic physics, how they work. We do not yet understand the detailed technology of designing the kind of metamaterials which we need in order to get the thing to work. So let me stop here and wait for feedback from you.
Sure. Thanks, Jack. Okay, before I go on any further, we have a panel that I asked to participate. and I'm going to introduce each of them right now. First is Dr. Chantel Topro. Chantel, wave your hand. Okay, also Nick Curto. Nick, okay. Bruce Pearson. All right, and then we also have someplace, we have Robert, he's there someplace.
Yes, I am here. I'm having trouble with the video. Thank you.
Okay,
See
Robert
you, we can see you.
Morningstar. Okay, and of course, Jack is also a member of the panel, even though he is a presenter. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to ask Chantel, do you have any comments or questions that you would like to pose to Jack at this point?
I think one of the things that we need to look at is why there is not better video footage, clearer images. You know, you see many things that are always posted and it's kind of blurry, and you know, you just there's really so little really good photographic record, you know, and the films are kind of blurry, you know, all these things, and that's something that always bothers me when I look at, you know, different footages or different images from, you know, different authorities, even MUFON and others, you know, Stephen Greer, etc. So that would be my question.
Can I respond?
Oh,
yes.
Okay, I agree with you that I've had the same difficulty, but I'm told, you all know this, is I'm not going to say anything you haven't all heard. The scuttlebutt is from people like Eric Davis and others that there are some very clear photographs and videos that show the thing in detail, but of course the military is you know, very scared about this whole thing, and rightly so. They should be scared because they don't understand anything. You know, it's a threat, that's for sure, and so they're not showing it to us. There's also another purely physics factor, because these machines are working by warp drive, like Star Trek warp drive. Okay, and what does warp drive mean? Warp drive means that the machines are controlling the gravitational field inside the fuselages of the machine. They're metamaterial fuselages. They're being pumped by electromagnetic energy into what's called a resonance state. And what that does, that increases the coupling strength between the applied electromagnetic field and the induced gravitational field. So they're able to control the local gravity field that the ship is in with relatively small amounts of energy. And that's the big trick. That's the problem basically that CIA and Defense Department 50 years ago asked me to work on, although they didn't spell it out that clearly. And we were all, you know, it took 50 years to solve the problem. Okay, so, but the point is, once you have warp drive, you have what's called gravitational lensing, because the gravitational field around the ship distorts the light rays. You know, it's like, and so that's when you see these flying saucers that they shape shift and stuff like that. That's gravitational lensing, and so that would also tend to make the images more blurry, because when the thing is in warp drive, there are great distortions in the electromagnetic fields, you know, the radar signals and the visual signals that are coming towards us. So that's one factor. But again, according to Eric Davis and others, there are very clear videos showing metallic structures that you know, that are classified.
Thank you, Jack. Okay, Nick, you're up.
Okay, thank you, Joe, and thank you for the invitation to join you today. I want to go to the big picture because I think that that's really important and pivotal. And what I'm asking here is, who are the ultimate puppeteers? Because this is certainly an age of deception beyond anything we could have ever imagined. And this deception has been going on for ages and ages, as we all know. And there's different people that you could possibly say would be the puppeteers. Different groups, different people, also at different times on the planet. But ultimately, and here's my question, who are the puppeteers at the very, very top? And are they from this planet or other places? That's my question.
Well, my quick answer to that question, they're from other times. Yes, the
What does that mean? Other times? Well, how do you mean that?
Well, I mean time travel. Okay, see, once you see, if you understand Einstein's general theory of relativity, the gravitational field correctly, you understand that the gravitational field is the very structure of space and times. So if you can control the gravitational field with small amounts of energy, which I claim we can, which I claim that's what we're seeing, that's what the UAPs are, then that's basically time travel. I could go into a lot of physics detail if I had, but this is not the venue to do that. But basically, these machines are coming from our future. And the reason I think that is not only because of the physics, is now it's going to sound like, oh, Jack is going, a nutcase, right? But you're going to have to look, everything's pretty weird. I was actually contacted by from these future entities when I was a child, and I was told all this was going to happen. So this is all being played out. Okay, and that's you have anything to say about that? I could go into detail. I'll go into detail if you
I'll
like.
tell you, perhaps you're right that this isn't the moment to go into an hour or two, but I, for one, would love that. And maybe at some point, publicly with us or with a small group of ufologists, I would go very deep with you into that, because I think that is a very pivotal question, and I'm not at all satisfied with all the explanations I've heard at all.
Yeah,
I'm just saying it's a question that goes into many. It would take hours, and I'm ready for that. Sign me up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all I could say is this: when I was 13 years old, I received a strange telephone call. Okay, and it said it was a conscious computer on board a spacecraft from the future. That's 1953, right? And that I was part of a group of, they said, bright, young, receptive minds, several hundred, I think they said 400. Hal Puthoff was one of them, and Russ Targ, all these people that you hear about, probably part of it. Uri Geller, people like that. And basically, they said they wanted to teach me their technology, and they said that I begin to meet the others in 20 years, which is 1973. This is 1953, right? So there's the time travel. They said they were from the future. And okay, so then to make a long story short, this has all been, it's in my book, Destiny Matrix Details. Other books, there's a book called The Stargate Conspiracy by Clive Prince and Lynn Picknett. They tell the story. There's books of Jeffrey Mishloff. There are all kinds of, it's around, the story is around. And, but basically, what happened was 20 years later, I'm an assistant professor of physics at San Diego State. And through some very strange circumstances, exactly on cue, 20 years later, I meet all these guys in the CIA project at the Stanford Research Institute. Russell Targ, who I think is Russell Targ is part of the. Russell
Russell is
Yes.
on. Matter of fact, I'm going to ping him.
Right, we'll bring him in here in a minute.
Yeah, bring in Russell Targ, because I want Russell was there. Okay, there was actually a recording of a segment of that meeting, about an hour of that meeting, a CIA recorded meeting at Dean Brown's house. Russell Targ is there in the meeting with me and Hal Puthoff and Brendan O'Regan. And we start talking about the UFOs, and Russell mentioned who was that rabbi, Russell, the rabbi you were involved with, the Kabbalistic rabbi who said they were from the future. Do you remember that? Do you remember our meeting? And what do you remember, Russ? Give your version of it. Can you hear me?
Russ, you're muted.
Oh, yeah. Unmute. You have to unmute. He has to unmute. Are you there, Russell?
He's working on it.
Yes. You hit the unmute button.
Yeah, on the application.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Got it.
There you go, sir. You're here. Thank you. Welcome.
Okay, I do not remember the rabbi, but I do have, I'm a physicist, and I do have something to contribute in that I have 20 years data working for the CIA, and the thing that we know for a fact and published in Nature, published in the Proceedings of the Institute of Engineering, is that consciousness permeates everything. That is to say, consciousness is independent of space, independent of time. We know for a fact that it's no harder to describe what's going on Jupiter than it is to describe what's going on across the street, because we've done that experiment. It's no harder to describe what's going to occur 3 or 4 days in the future than what's happening concurrently, simultaneously, because we've done tasks for the CIA, what's going to happen 3 days in the future at this location. And we supported ourselves for 2 decades doing operational things for the CIA. And as you know, the CIA is not easily amused.
Exactly.
So they would come to us and say, a general has been kidnapped in Italy, and Joe McMoneagle would give us a drawing of where he is in in northern Italy. And then they went to that corner and they found the general. And a Russian airplane went down at Africa. No one could find it because it was hidden in the foliage. Our satellite photography couldn't penetrate the foliage, but a well-experienced one of our viewers was able to sit in front of a map of Africa, draw a circle. The river is there, the village is there. If you send a helicopter there, you'll find it. And Jimmy Carter appears at the beginning of our film, Third Eye Spies, and said, yes, psychics in California found the downed Russian airplane and no one else could find it.
Right.
So I have great confidence as a scientist that a person could learn to quiet their mind and describe what's going on in the distance and in the future with very great accuracy.
Right. And I claim that we understand the quantum mechanical physics, how that all works. That's my claim. But Russell, don't you remember that meeting? Do you remember the meeting we had at Dean Brown's house with Hal and Brendan O'Regan? We were sitting around, and there was a woman psychologist there and another psychologist, Lisa Nella was there.
I remember all those people. Those people are all friends of mine. I remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember
the meeting.
I don't remember the rabbi.
That was your guy, yeah. But do you remember us talking about flying saucers and from the future and all that stuff? Do you remember that?
More than one. I got to remember, I'm 87 years old.
Right.
So my physics is still pretty sound, but telling you what happened 50 years ago on a date may not be too reliable.
Okay, but do you remember meeting me? Do you remember meeting me there? Do you remember
I remember meeting you and Lisa Nella and
Yes.
Dean Brown. We're all good friends of mine over decades. I can't. I'm on the witness stand here. I can't testify that there was one particular meeting.
Okay. All right.
I met people in Dean Brown's house dozens of times.
Yeah.
I mean, Dean was the best friend of mine.
I thought I made a bigger impression than that. But fortunately, there was a tape recording of the meeting with Russell talking on the, so there is a tape recording, and you can hear it on my SoundCloud channel. Just go to Jack Sarfatti SoundCloud and you'll see CIA recording, and you'll hear Russell and me talking about this. This guy Saul Paul Sarag up in Eugene, Oregon, may have the more of the meeting. This is only an excerpt, about an hour and 15 minutes, but it was actually a several hours meeting. And what I do very clearly recall is that this. I mentioned my phone call when I was a kid that was a UFO from the future, and at that point, Russell Targ kind of supported that interpretation, and so did Brendan O'Regan. And more recently, since I know Joe is going to want to go into the BESA, the Begin-Sadat report from Frank Milburn,
Yes.
that just came out a few months ago. Frank is now on record. I should say, Frank is a retired British Army Sandhurst graduate, and he's involved in intelligence now as a private investigator. But Frank has said very recently on video that all his intelligence contacts in the CIA and the British intelligence and the Israel, he works closely with the Israelis, with the Mossad, that they all now agree with me that these machines are time travel machines coming from our future. And of course, that's totally consistent with what Russ is saying in terms of, the paranormal, the remote viewing. And I'm claiming we conceptually understand in terms of mainstream physics, both how the remote viewing that Russell Targ talks about, how that works in principle, and we also understand the time travel capabilities of these craft. So to go back to Nick Curto's question, who are the puppet masters? The puppet masters are an advanced intelligence from our future that will actually evolve out of what we're doing here today. It's kind of like that Star Trek 4, the Star Trek 4, where they go back in time and the rocket scientists. Oddly enough, Paramount Pictures actually has me explaining time travel in the director's cut of that movie, which they put out later, on CD. You can actually see me talking about all this stuff. And it's interesting that they have me talking about it, right? Truth is stranger than fiction.
May I interject for a second? And I don't want to,
Yeah.
I don't want to take us off into the weeds, but from my research over the last almost 40 some years, I have seen a coming together in the last several years, if I may, of the nuts and bolts investigators, which is part of the reality, as well as a consideration that maybe some of these other paranormal activities, scenarios, anecdotal evidence, and so forth, may in fact be linked together in a way that in the past we would never connect the dots. And as you discuss, Mr. Targ, thank you for you two gentlemen, this is a watershed for me to actually be able to interact with you personally on this forum. But everyone from the Hopi Indians to Nikola Tesla to many of the world religions have held that, whether you call it the chi, the life force, the soul, the ether, is, as you said, Mr. Targ, capable of an interconnection here. Is this not maybe part and parcel with the entire phenomenon? And not to speak for you, Jack, but is that not what you're saying? That
That's exactly what I'm saying.
okay, so I appreciate that
Yeah,
maybe there's something to that.
Oh,
We're saying, we want to
it's
say,
more than something. It's a precise. I could write down the equations, math. It's real theoretical physics, the way I was taught by Hans Bethe, who's head of the theoretical physics division of Los Alamos in the Manhattan Project. This is technology I'm talking about too. I'm talking about we can start making conscious computers, conscious artificial intelligence. I'm talking about when if Elon Musk were to wake up and understand what the hell I'm talking about, I'm talking about Tesla cars that are conscious the way we are. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but it's coming. I'm talking about your iPhone is going to be conscious. When you talk to Siri, right now Siri's pretty stupid. I mean, they say some things, but the artificial intelligence we have today is not conscious. Once it's conscious, it's a whole new world. But also there's another thing. Remember the movie Transcendence, in principle, since we understand how our consciousness is generated in the microtubules, actually, probably the Hameroff-Penrose idea, which I kind of subscribe to, that we understand the physical mechanism of how our conscious awareness is being generated as a purely physical phenomenon. That means, for example, you're about to die. They could, in principle, the technology is coming where your memories, at least parts of your streams of consciousness, your experiences will be uploaded into a quantum computing cloud. and then you can be downloaded into a new body, into a robot or even a genetic clone of all that is now it's science fiction. But Tim, it's not science fiction, it's not science yet. It's right intermediate between science and fiction. This is coming technology. It's not that difficult. We understand it in principle how to do it. And the fact that we now see these UAPs, these advanced machines that are harassing the US Navy, and apparently also the Russian Navy and the Chinese Navy, it's not just the American Navy, and of course the Italian Navy. The Italian Navy has actually had a ship damaged by these things. And also he had a helicopter that was shot down by these things. Okay, so this technology is real, and we're going to develop it.
May I ask
Jack,
you a question?
Jack,
I'm sorry, Joe. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, no, just following on that, I understand that, and it makes perfect sense that we interpret time in a linear fashion because that's how our minds can understand past, present, and future.
Wait. Let me interrupt.
Yes, sir.
That's how your mind.
Yeah.
Right, but
that's not the way. But let me finish my sentence.
Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
That's not the way people who understand general relativity understand it.
And that was exactly my point. That if time is not, it does this. Could you maybe, for in layman's terms, to accommodate me, but does this apply to the multiverse, the fact that it's pages in a book and it's all happening simultaneously, and does that correlate in some way?
Yeah, you could say that. Actually, Fred Hoyle, I forget the name of the book. Maybe Fred Hoyle wrote a science fiction, The Black Cloud. I think it was The Black Cloud, in which he. I would suggest you just look at that book. He describes it in a in a science fiction sort of nice, easily understood way. Yeah, you could say that.
Okay, let me jump on here. Wanted Robert Morningstar. Robert, would you like to weigh in?
My prostate is calling.
A timely
Better
moment.
answer it.
Yeah. Yes, it's an intriguing conversation. I'm happy to see Russell Targ for the first time. Sorry you can't see me. The Zoom seems to have a problem
No,
with my cameras. I have two cameras. Excellent Logitech.
We see you now, Robert.
You do?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Well,
we do.
that's good to know. It's blank here, but it's an intriguing conversation. I wanted to talk a bit about information from the future, because Jack's phone call is legendary in my archives, and people who are involved in remote viewing are getting information from the future all the time. I mean, I know that my life has been changed by warnings from the future, and particularly in remote viewing or in lucid dreaming. I have one vivid memory of a car crash in which I saw myself in a very violent crash, and bodies and pieces of cars all over the highway. And I dwelt on the vision, and it was also an auditory dream. It was very impressive in that I could hear the cries and screams and the crunching of metal, and the tow trucks and the tow truck drivers yelling and screaming on the highway. So I altered my behavior. I saw that what had caused the accident was a white car, and I was driving a white car at the time. So I said, well, maybe if I don't drive a white car, I won't get involved in this accident. So I borrowed a car of another color, bigger. And as it turned out, the whole dream unfolded as it was revealed in the lucid dream, except that no one died. My changing the color of my car actually altered events in such a way that although there were 6 cars involved in this pileup, no one was killed. So this is information from the future. It happens to us regularly, and it makes you wonder who is sending the message. There's a very famous movie by John Carpenter, which is called The Prince of Darkness, and it's about a monastery where anyone who sleeps in that monastery has the same dream. And it's someone from the future whispering. You can't really make out the message until the very end of the movie, but we do receive warnings from the future. And another intriguing idea is that the universe is not unfolding like dominoes falling in rows, predetermined, but that something is actually drawing us into the future. And that's my view. I believe that time is a form of light, and that time has to arrive before light can pass through space-time. And so I believe that some of us who are involved in remote viewing, lucid dreaming, or the paranormal psychic abilities are tuned in to a higher frequency reality. I believe that Einstein knew about it, but kept the little genie in the box, and I'll have more to say that in the near future. I believe that our mathematics is fundamentally wrong. I believe that the number line is fallacious. The number line is an illusion, because the value between 0 and 1 is not the same as the value between 1 and 2 or 2 and 3. It's actually a quantum leap. To go from 0 to anything is an infinite jump. You can multiply 0 by any number you want, and you still get 0. And I believe that the universe is fractal, and some of the delusions of science, especially in modern times, anti-science, is what we're dealing with right now. The reversal, the perversion of scientific principles to force true an agenda, a particular political agenda. So, and I wonder when Jack comes back, he keeps talking about
I'm back. I'm back.
Oh, Jack, you were talking about a rabbi, and I'm wondering if he was Stan Tenen.
No, it's not Santana. It's this other guy. His name will come back.
Yeah. Well, he had that interesting idea that we are three-dimensional projections of a higher dimensional reality, and that actually everything that we are seeing is in the past.
No, it's not him. It's it'll come to me. I have it in my book, Space Time and Destiny Matrix, but it doesn't really matter. Listen, I agree with some of what you say. I disagree with other things you said.
That's okay. That's
all your statements about your experiences, I agree with. You know, the information coming from the future, all that. I disagree with all your theoretical physics type attempts to explain it. Leave the physics to me. Just
okay. All right.
The experience, your experience. Okay. Yeah. All right.
That's fine.
We understand all this stuff. We understand exactly how the information is coming from the future. It's well understood now. There's a Israeli physicist named Yakia Aharonov, who actually Obama gave him a medal of a science medal when Obama was president, who worked with David Bohm, who I also worked with in London. And Aharonov has explained it, but he has what's called weak measurement theory. It's an extended form of quantum mechanics in which quantum entanglement, all the spooky action at a distance that explains remote viewing, telepathy and all that stuff, all that is understood as information coming back from the future. And it's well understood. It's been confirmed in the laboratory, and it's a standard mainstream physics at this point. So how information does get back to us from the future and how it's connected with quantum entanglement is now really well understood by physicists like me. Explaining it to the public is another, that's not so easy, but we understand it, and it's not mysterious. There's no mystery about it.
Well, let me agree with you, Jack. There's no doubt from our research that the future is available. You're able to, if somebody gives you coordinates of the future and say what's going to happen there, you have a very, very good chance, if you're experienced, of being able to describe what's going to happen a few days in the future. And the unquestionable experiment we did, in addition to finding lost generals and so forth, is that we forecast changes in the silver commodity market 9 weeks in a row. Every week we would make a forecast as to whether the market would go up a little, up a lot, down a little, and down a lot. Based on that information from the future, we would make a present time investment buying or selling silver, and we did that 9 times in a row. So
Yeah,
there's no doubt.
Why did you keep doing it?
Well, that's another. So there's no doubt that the future is available.
Yeah,
With
yeah.
regard to precognitive dreams, I often have very accurate precognitive dreams, and my idea is the future is available, but it's not particularly changeable. That is, you have free will.
Right, exactly.
What I would say is you have free will, but not as much as you think you have.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with that in terms of what I know about the physics. I agree. Of course, you have the famous story of Ingo Swann and the CIA with the red Chinese nuclear test. You may want to talk about. Remember that one?
Yeah, I did that with him.
Yeah, right.
The CIA came to us with coordinates and said, we're very anxious to know what's going to take place at these coordinates 3 days from now. Ingo said, I need some colored pencil. This is very beautiful. And he said, there's beautiful rainbow colors in the sky and a row of trucks in the distance. And he drew that, and I have the drawing. And the CIA, not we, but the CIA then knew that a nuclear bomb test would take place and it would fail. Because what you see with colored lights in the sky and rainbows is the pyrophoric display of burning uranium in the sky. No mushroom cloud, but if you burn uranium in the sky, you get this beautiful 4th of July display. So CIA knew from what Ingo said that indeed in 3 days the Chinese would do their test and it would fail, and that was correct.
Exactly. Yeah, that's
Russell. Russell, what year was that test took place?
the 70s, right?
Yeah, in the 70s. I would say middle 70s.
Yeah.
Middle 70s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, with regard to this being new age, there's a picture of the guy over my left shoulder, Padmasambhava, has written several books in the year 800 on your nature, which is timeless awareness. He said that if you think that who you are is mashed potatoes, if you think that who you are is what you see in the mirror, then you're going to be in for a lot of suffering. And because he was a Buddhist teacher, his goal was to help diminish your suffering. He said, if you learn to experience, quiet your mind, that your nature is timeless awareness, not only can you experience the distance in the future, your awareness and your activity is independent of space and time because your consciousness is independent of time. Consequently, you're free of cause and effect. And this is all written in the 800s. So what we're talking about is not New Age. This was the ambiguity with regard to time and effect, seeing into the future, was articulated in detail 1,200 years ago.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Now I'm going to stick a stake in the ground here with my question or comment. And then what I'd like to do, I'd like to open it up to folks that are sitting out there if they would have any questions for Jack, you, or anybody else that's on the panel. So I'm going to make my comment. I'm going to take it back to two points that were made early on. Chantel brought up the point about the clarity of the pictures of various aerial phenomena or the lack of clarity. That's one thing. The other thing is the touching on the transhumanism that was brought up early on as well, that Jack kind of addressed. Taking the transhumanism portion first, right now, of course, we're at a cusp, as was said, about making a major leap. It's almost like a singularity between humanism and something other than that that's going to be down the road. Artificial intelligence obviously is a key component of that. The question that I have regarding this, that if we go into the transhumanist portion, how does that affect the physics that are going to be what the human condition is now, as opposed to what it ultimately is going to be? Are we seeing the last, as Isaac Asimov wrote about childhood's end, are
Yeah.
we at childhood's end right now? That's my
Yeah,
question
I
for
think,
everybody.
I think it's, wasn't it Arthur C. Clarke? Was it Arthur C.
Arthur,
Clarke?
yes, you're correct. I'm sorry. It was Arthur C. Clarke.
Yeah, actually, I met him. I met Arthur C. Clarke, but with part of the Uri Geller test at Birkbeck College. I was with that Brendan O'Regan asked me and Fred Allen Wolf to arrange back in, when was that, 1970, I guess it was 74.
Clark does not believe in psychic abilities, incidentally.
Well, you know, he was there in the room with Uri Geller, with
Yeah.
me and Arthur Kessler and Brendan and David Bohm and John Hasted and so. But in any case, yeah, the answer is yes. This is childhood's end. The monolith. It's Kubrick. Yeah, it's 2001. We're making Star Trek real. Okay, there's something to understand. The CIA has been manipulating public awareness using Hollywood
Yes.
for many years, right? Francis Ford Coppola, Steven Spielberg, all these people making these movies, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In fact, I introduced Jacques Vallée to the move at a party with Uri Geller and at Francis Ford Coppola's house in 1976, I think it was. This is how Jacques Vallée became the technical advisor of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, in which the guy Francois Truffaut plays a Jacques Vallée character in that movie. So the point is that the Central Intelligence Agency has and other, I guess, intelligence agencies have been manipulating Hollywood to get us ready for this, let's call it disclosure. Yeah, the disclosure that we're not alone in the universe, and that in fact time travel is real, and everything's about to change now. I mean, there's no stopping it at this point, because now the Navy, the Pentagon, has revealed that this stuff is real. So yeah, so everything that you see in Star Trek and Star Wars is kind of real. I mean, it's basically, okay, let me say this. Gene Roddenberry, right? Gene Roddenberry, who wrote the script for Star Trek.
Star Trek.
Gene Roddenberry was part of Andrei Puharich's group with, you know about this, Russ, don't you? You know, the nine, not only the nine, but the Seth, all that Seth stuff. Who was the?
I'm very familiar with that. Gene wanted to make a film about one of my books, but
Yeah.
I want to ask you about something you just said. You're talking about the recent government release of information about craft going near U.S. aircraft carriers on the east and west coast. There's no doubt that the government has done that. And that's obviously some kind of government operation.
Yeah.
In your opinion, are those spacecraft terrestrial or extraterrestrial?
Oh, they're extratemporal. They're from the future.
So you don't think those are made by the government?
No. Now, because everybody I know in the government is so let me say, so stupid they couldn't make it. I hope to be proved wrong. I'd love to have egg on my face about that. But I'm claiming everybody I've met in the government is basically, when it comes to physics, is kind of an idiot and totally clueless, has no idea what's going on, and they're listening to the wrong people. Now, this is just my personal experience, and I could be wrong, but no one I met connected with the government understands the basic physics of the phenomenon, and they're just covering up, they're just hiding their ignorance, and they're running scared.
So you don't think that the current release of all those photographs, or whatever they are, could be a government disinformation operation?
Oh, well, of course, that's always possible. Wait a minute. I mean, yeah, that's always possible. And I think it's unlikely. Now, I do know this. This is something funny. because I was with Hal Putoff and Kit Green in London at the end of October 2017 when they were setting up the disclosure. With the well, I was we were at this meeting of David Bohm's centennial that the Templeton, that the Fetzer Foundation was funding at the University of London, and I had been I had been working with David Bohm in 1971 in London, and so we were all together at this meeting, and I was with Hal and Kit in their hotel room in London, and we were talking, and every 10 minutes, either Hal would run out of the room to take a phone call, or Kit would run out of the room to take the phone call, coming from Washington, from the Pentagon, and maybe from Leslie Kean. They were setting up the disclosure of in the New York Times article that came out in December of 2017. I was actually there. They didn't want me to hear the details of what they were talking about. So when you say, is it a disinformation operation? To a certain extent, it is a disinformation operation, but that doesn't mean that the craft are not really there, that it didn't really happen. Okay, and we know 50 years ago we were hearing stuff about
Well,
that.
we're seeing what the New York Times published are radar images of something or other. We have not seen pictures of craft. What we've seen are radar images.
Well, that's FLIR. I think that's forward-looking.
That's the FLIR, yeah.
Yeah, I know what it is, but it's not a picture of a spacecraft.
Yeah, no, right. But we have the testimony of Commander Fravor and other U.S. Navy pilots whose testimony I trust. And plus Kevin Day. I've actually talked to Kevin Day, who was the radar officer. So, I think it's real. And then we have Frank Milburn's investigations, talking with a lot of intelligence people from different agencies who basically concur with my explanation that they're coming from the future. And I was surprised to hear Frank say this publicly on television.
Going back to the last aspect, Chantel's question, 3 instances while I was in the service, what I physically saw with my own eyes.
Yeah.
The objects that I saw were clear as a bell. However, I think I understand why all the photographs come up as blurred as they are, because of electromagnetism or some other force of energy that is captured by the cameras, but not the human eye. That's just a simple observation, not an expert observation. It's just
well, I'm saying
personal.
Listen, what I'm saying is that the blurriness, some of that blurriness is from the gravitational lensing from the warp drive field itself. The gravity field itself will cause that kind of blurriness. In fact, there's this guy named Thor, and he had a website, UAP website. Apparently, he's some kind of a master's level astronomer, astrophysicist, and what he did, he published all kinds of detailed analysis of the actual photographs that they do have, showing how it is gravitational lensing from warp drive, exactly like I said. But then apparently he got scared off by the government, and he shut down his website, and he's like gone into hiding. However, Tim Ventura from Anti-Gravity captured the entire, we have the website, it's up there on the web. But the point is that this is a guy, a competent scientist, who backs up everything I said totally independently. He didn't even know about my stuff, and I didn't even know about his stuff. And he's coming to the same conclusions, although he doesn't have an explanation how to do it, which is what I have. But he shows how all the blurriness is coming from a warp drive technology.
Okay, thanks, Jack. Okay, we have 3 hands up. I'm going to call on Jonathan Davies. Jonathan, would you like to unmute and ask your question of whomever?
Jonathan? Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for inviting me to this, Jack. You're part of my private chat group. I'm just wondering, you've been talking about time travel, and you quoted Frank Milburn. Frank Milburn is a friend as well of mine, and he was a part of our group at one point. Frank believes in that we're actually in the middle of a time war that's taking place. And do you also agree with that? And he also believes that the Greys are part of that from the future, that we actually become the Greys, along the lines of Michael Masters' thoughts on this.
Yeah, I don't. Okay, this is yeah. We have to mention Michael Masters. He's very important because Michael Masters is totally independent of me. I didn't know Michael Masters. Michael Masters didn't know me. He's not a physicist. He's like an evolutionary biologist, but he's obviously a very smart guy. And he has come out, he's written a book in which he explains how using Darwinian evolutionary methods, theory, that yeah, he has this theory what the Greys are. And I think that's what Frank is talking about. Now, I'm not an expert in that field. And but it's certainly totally consistent with everything that I'm saying. I mean, I was contacted by what said it was a conscious artificial intelligence in a computer, which they wanted me to build them. I'm actually their creator. You know, it's like Star Trek 4. I'm like the rocket scientist, you know, that creates the warp drive. In fact, I guess that is who I am in a way. So the answer to that is, yeah, I agree with yeah, I generally agree, and I'm not in any position to question Michael Masters. He knows his thing.
So when you had the message from the future, do you believe it was from the Greys?
No, well, I don't know. No, I never met a Grey. All my experience is that, and here, there's something I forgot to mention. My experience is that it was a conscious computer on board a spacecraft, like a Tic Tac from the future, okay? Flying saucer from the future. But here's the strange part of it. The strange part of it is that I only remember a single phone call. And if you listen to the CIA tape with Russell Targ and me, I talk about it there, and I talk about one phone call. I got one phone call, which I remembered, okay? Now, 20 years later, in 1973, around the time that I'm, in 1974, when I'm meeting Russell and Hal and all these guys, Brendan O'Regan, Edgar Mitchell, Andrea Puharich, meeting all these guys, as predicted said I would beat them, well, that prediction is coming true. I'm up in Ossining, New York, at Andrea Puharich's house. He gives me a book he just wrote called Uri, about Uri Geller. And it was Puharich who brought Uri Geller to the CIA from Israel. So, it's all this intelligence, black ops stuff going on. And I took the book, I was coming back from London, and I took the book down to meet my mother, staying with my mother in Flatbush in Brooklyn. And she's reading the book. And she says, Jackie, my Jewish mother from Brooklyn, says, Jackie, do you remember when this happened to you? And I said, what are you talking about, Mom? Says, the metallic voice on the computer from the flying saucer. What's the matter with you? You don't remember that? And I said, well, and the point is, she said, my mother's story is that I had at least 3 weeks of these phone calls, continual phone calls. I was on the phone for hours, okay, walking around glassy-eyed. And finally, kids back then, in the early 50s, 13, with the phone, they were always on the phone talking to their friends. So finally, and she wasn't around all the time, but so finally she got scared, and she grabbed the phone away from me and said, who's this? There was a cold metallic voice, like Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking's voice, the metallic voice. That's exactly what the Stephen Hawking's mechanical voice was, that kind of voice. And it said it was a computer on board a spacecraft, and they want to speak to her son Jack. Matter of fact, she heard it. My mother heard it. Millie Jacobson heard.
See, to me, Jack, that would suggest that the phone call came from around 5 years ago, when we had that sort of voice technology that Stephen Hawking was using. So does that suggest we've got time travel now?
I don't know. I'm not going to speculate. I'm just going to give you the facts, man. Just drag with the facts. The fact is, so my mother said, don't call here again, slam down the phone. That's a memory. But she remembers these 3 weeks. I still have no memory of that. Okay, so that's what missing time, about like abduction, whatever you want to call it. But that's the fact. And then back in the 70s, around the time that I first met Russell, I was at Henry Dakin. There was a guy, Henry Dakin, had this paranormal laboratory in Pacific Heights, Washington, laboratory with Saul Paul Sirag and Barbara Honecker and all these people. And it was Jim Harder. Was it Jim Harder, Russ? You know, the guy from Berkeley, the professor from Berkeley, mechanical engineering, who did hypnosis, past life. You knew him. Any case, they had this guy from Berkeley who was part of the SRI group, basically, and he tried to do deep hypnosis on me, to regression, to try to find out what happened those 3 weeks. And he said he couldn't get through. There was like a wall. He couldn't, and even so, be that as it may. But I should say this, that basically, I feel subjectively as though all the physics I'm coming out with is the physics that I've been sort of receiving, telepath, through whatever, through my subconscious, because I just write it, just comes out. It's like it's effortless. It's like automatic writing that Andre Breton, the surrealist, writes about. So I'm just like I'm just a channel, man. I'm just channeling it. Okay. And
thanks,
so
Jack. Thanks for that. Russell, can I just ask you a quick question and say hello to you?
Yeah, who
I'm
is
a
this?
huge fan. I actually chat with Hal Putoff most days as well. So I've just told him now that I'm on here talking to you. So very cool. Can I ask you, do you know by any chance who Axelrod was or is?
Do I know who Axelrod was? No, I don't know. I read Ingo's book, of course. Ingo thinks that somebody from the CIA called Axelrod communicated with him. Now, as I stretch my memory, I can tell you, I did not know anybody named Axelrod at the CIA. But if you put me on the lie detector, my memory is that there was somebody in the background named Axelrod who might have been at a level above us. Well, we were dealing with the director of the CIA. See, everybody's afraid of ESP. So everything we did at NASA and at the CIA was run by the director. So the answer is Axelrod is a name. I'm not telling you I've forgotten Axelrod. I never knew Axelrod, but there was an Axelrod at the CIA, contemporaneous with us. But it's a big company. There's many tens of thousands of people. So there was some Axelrod in the future, but not in my current activities.
Okay, let me say, can I add to that? I may know who Axelrod was. I'm not sure. Okay, Axelrod may be Harold Chipman. Harold Chipman was a senior CIA officer who actually funded me for a while and befriended me. And he was involved. He goes way back. He was involved with MK Ultra. He was involved in setting up the houses where they dosed LSD, with the people in San Francisco. He was part of that. I think he ran that project actually. And he told me he was Pat Price's partner in a CIA front private detective agency that they set up in Oakland. And
when was that supposed to be?
I guess the 60s, before he told Chipman told me that he brought Pat Price into your SRI project. Chipman told me that he was really the guy behind funding your project. Now Hal Putoff didn't know him, but the guy who does know Chipman very well is Kit Green. Kit Green and Chipman.
Or Chipman was in our offices. I met Chipman.
Oh, you did meet Chipman?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So why did Hal Putoff said he never knew who Chipman was? You remember Chipman? Oh, well, you met Chipman. We were all together with Chipman at
SRI.
No, but also at Dakin's. At Dakin's, I think there was. Yeah, you were there.
The origin one of the origins of our program is that I was leaving lasers, and I went to NASA, and I went to CIA. I had entree to CIA because I had built stuff for CIA.
Yeah.
So I met Kit Green in April of 1972.
Okay.
So when Uri Geller showed up at our place, Kit Green already knew that who I was, and that I was interested in psychic stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So, but okay. So, Axelrod maybe is Harold Chipman. Now, there's one other guy that.
Yeah, why don't we ask our question, or why does he want to know that?
All right, go ahead. Good point.
Well, I've just been reading a book by Nick Cook, a British author.
Oh yeah,
he used to work for James Defence Weekly. He's also part of our group, and he's got the archives.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's right. He's got the Ingo Swan archives. Yes,
that's right.
That's right. That's
so
right.
I've been reading that book, and I've been getting interested in who this is. And Hal wouldn't tell me who it is. He said it was totally confidential, and he couldn't tell me.
Oh, so Hal claims he knows. So he's not. Okay, there's one other name I want to throw into this mix in case a guy who first of all, their names. Okay, Chipman was also known as Orwell. Orwell was his code name, okay? And these guys, Axelrod is probably not the real guy's name, right? Now there's another CIA, let me finish it. There's another CIA guy named Colonel Harry Wolfe. I spelled with a W-O-L-F-E, I believe. And I have a friend who his name I don't want to mention right now, and because I don't have his permission to mention him. He's a pretty well-known, well-connected guy. And my friend who had been in the Marines, he was a tank commander in the Marines, stuff like that. His brother is a colonel in the Marines. In any case, as a result of his Marine duty, he was in the late 60s contacted by this Colonel Harry Wolfe, and basically asked to courier retrieved UFO materials, including from Roswell, to different intelligence agencies around the world. He claimed he flew to the French security. This is back in the late 60s. French security services, MI6 in London, someplace even in Asia and Japan, stuff like that. And he claims that he actually had in his possession an Army duffel bag, say AAAF, Roswell, and for a week, and he actually tested it. He had some metallurgical tools. He actually had, for example, the strut with the symbols on it that Colonel Philip Corso describes in his book, The Day After Roswell. Okay, and that under certain conditions, the thing suddenly had like an anti-gravity sort of feature to it. So now this is a guy who's. And he mentioned this is all this. His case officer was a guy who called himself Colonel Harry Wolfe, and this be like 1968, 1969. So I just mentioned this because it all ties some of the dots connected. You know, the High Strangers Paranormal and the Roswell, the flying saucer UFO, and also it turns out my friend's father, my friend, is from Idaho, and his father worked with Kenneth Arnold. And so when he was a kid, he remembers Kenneth Arnold coming back. You know, Kenneth Arnold, the pilot, first saw the flying saucer.
Was he CIA?
Was who CIA?
Was Kenneth Arnold really CIA? I
don't know.
That's for somewhere that said.
I don't know.
I believe he was a salesman, wasn't he?
I mean, no, salesman. Yeah, but who knows what he was really?
He comes forward. Arnold comes forward as a pilot. In his interviews, he was a pilot who first coined the word flying saucer.
Exactly. Yeah. But what I'm saying is my friend, who I know very well, who I trust, okay, my friend, as a child, my friend's father worked for Kenneth Arnold, did some, stuff on his ranch. They were like cowboys, okay? And so this is like from the horse's mouth, direct experience of my friend as a child, remembering these, Kenneth Arnold talking about all this stuff. So the interconnections, the synchronicity is very tight here. It's like a small world. I mean, this is a pattern here across time, right? This is not a coincidence. It's not a random coincidence. There all this kind of synchronicity that this friend of mine, is directly involved in what we're talking about.
So, to the best of your knowledge now, nobody in the world is able to make anything like a UFO. Now,
yet.
the director of the Skunk Works is
Right.
famous for saying in an interview shortly before the death, if the little creature needs to go back to his planet, we have hardware to take him home.
Yeah, I know. What's his name? Who said that? Yeah, the guy, he's dead now. I have mixed feelings about that. Now, the only way that would make sense to me is, since these are time traveling machines, that some of these Tic Tacs went back to Lockheed, and then maybe they have it now. Okay, let me. I do know. Okay, let me say something else. Without naming names, just recently I told you about it, was in the Zoom meeting with people from the Italian Air Force and the Italian Navy in Rome, Zoom, when I was in London. And this one gentleman who high up in the, as a technical guy in the Italian Navy, told me that when he was a young ensign or something, when he was first starting his naval career back in the 70s, he was actually examining one of the retrieved flying saucer craft or Tic Tac craft, whatever. And he was actually inside it. Okay. And he said, he described, now this is what's important. He said inside there were three small seats, like whoever was in them, like it's like graves, they were small creatures. They had to be small creatures, because when he tried to sit in it, he was too big and too tall for it. And what he was describing, what the Italian guy was describing, was exactly what Colonel Philip Corso describes in his book, The Day After Roswell, which is edited by William Burns, right? But the point is, the Italian Navy guy never read Phil Corso's book, didn't know about it, and is now corroborating independently everything that Phil Corso says in that book. And this guy is the real deal from the Italian Navy, that I know. And so that's a interesting piece of information, I think.
But we don't know where it came from.
Well, we don't. I'm saying it's coming from the future. It's coming from the future. That's what they told me back in 1953. So now I believe it. I mean, I've always been very skeptical. I've always been very skeptical until the Navy now has revealed all this stuff. So now, look, we don't know anything for sure about anything empirical, right? There's what's called base there. We can only form educated guesses and make probability estimates of what is likely to be the case, all right? So what I'm saying now is my best guess is that what happened to me as a kid was exactly what it said it was. It wasn't a deception. It really was this advanced artificial intelligence, a conscious artificial intelligence on a flying saucer or a Tic Tac, whatever, a UAP, whatever, UAV, whatever you want to call it, coming from the future, telling me what was going to happen in the future in 20 years when I met Russell Targ. Predicted I was going to meet Russell Targ. Didn't say Russell Targ, but you're going to meet the others involved in our project. And the project involves both paranormal and UFOs. 1953, I'm being told this. Right on schedule, 20 years later, I meet Russell Targ, who's right here right now. He doesn't quite remember the meeting, but we met. And there's a recording of our first meeting. Okay, so I'm taking the simplest possibility. A few years ago, I wouldn't have been as sure as I am right now, given everything that now is unfolding, that things are getting more dramatic and more direct, that this is the reality. This is our whole conception of the universe is changing. It's about to change dramatically. And of course, a lot of people would be frightened and very scared, including people in the Pentagon, including and other governments. But, of course, the intelligence, the CIA itself is fractured, is split just the way, the country's polarized, the world is polarized, different competing factions. But, in fact, somebody mentioned there was some of these military officers who say we shouldn't investigate this because it's against the Bible or something. Russell, you know about that.
We had enemies of the CIA who were eager, they were concerned that our work was fast supported by the devil.
Elite.
Yeah, right. So by the devil. So this is going to be an issue. This is a big problem. Okay.
It was a big problem for us.
Yes. So the point is, but it's happening. You can't stop it. It's all right. It's happening. The fact is, it's a military threat. Okay. Oh, one other thing I should mention. One thing I should mention. The Americans, people like Randolph Stone, Senator Marco Rubio, Senator Gillibrand, all the people asking, wanting information, they're being prevented from talking to me directly. Okay. Meantime, the Russians, I was told that Vladimir Putin personally is interested in what Jack Sarfati is doing. I was told this by Russians. Okay. And if the Russians have videoed me, you can see me on a Russian television on Channel 5 St. Petersburg in June 2016. You'll see me in it's like their 60 Minutes show. Millions and millions of Russians all over Russia and are watching this damn thing. Okay, I'm the only American that they interview on this show, and they have me as a well-known political scientist in America. I don't know why they got that. I'm a physicist. Okay, so but the point is this. That the Russians have been monitoring my physics work since the 1960s. And the Russians were very involved in monitoring this whole SRI thing, everything that Russ is talking about, of course. Then it turns out in the early 1980s, I was involved with the Reagan administration in setting up the Strategic Defense Initiative, okay? And we had back channel discussions with the Russians back then in Moscow, in particular this guy named Igor Aksharin, who was a Moscow physicist. And of course, Estlin was involved with the Gorbachev Foundation. There was all this stuff going on with Estlin and the Russians, with the Arbatov at the Institute USA in Canada. So all this stuff is going on. In any case, the Russians consider Jack Sarfati a serious person, okay, both in politics and in physics. Okay, so and so the Russians have been running with my stuff for years.
Yeah, I was visited. I was invited to go to the Soviet Union in 1983 and 84,
Right.
which I did, and they were doing work, especially in Soviet in southern Russia.
Yeah,
that greatly resembled my work, and
yes,
they
of
said
course.
we were having problems in that oftentimes the viewer would describe the target before we chose it, and we didn't know how to judge that. And
Right.
that's something that occurred in our work.
Yeah.
I want to tell you, we did a long distance remote viewing with Ingo Swan, which you probably don't know about. I had a contract monitor for my ESP teaching machine, and he said, this is George Pesders, said, by the way, we're going to send a spacecraft to Jupiter tomorrow. And Ingo, could you take a look at Jupiter and tell us, is there anything that we're going to find that's a surprise? If you're sitting here now with Russell's office, could you just close your eyes and look at Jupiter? Are there any surprises? And Ingo said, yeah, give me a pad of paper. And he said, yeah, what I find here is that I never noticed before, but Jupiter is surrounded by a ring of large ice crystals. And my friend George said, Ingo, aren't you looking at Saturn? And Ingo said, for Christ's sake, I've been looking at the solar system my entire life. You got to believe I know the difference between Jupiter and Saturn. When you get to Jupiter, you'll see that there's this large ring of ice crystals.
Yeah.
And 8 months later, they took those pictures. Point of the story is that he was able to transfer his awareness 500 million miles from my laboratory to Jupiter.
Right.
He could say, oh, you want Jupiter? I can tune in Jupiter right now, and here's what I see. And it took no time for his awareness to move from California to Jupiter.
Exactly. I have another Ingo Swan story that kind of corroborates my story. This is a story that Sol Paul Sarag told me about Brendan O'Regan, Ingo, and Barbara Hanukkah. Apparently, Brendan was doing an experiment with Ingo at SRI, and suddenly Ingo went into a trance, as he was prone to do, and he started speaking in a cold, metallic voice, saying he was a conscious computer on board a flying saucer 100 years in the future. Okay.
I have no experience with such a thing.
Yeah, but this is what Saul Paul Sirag, who I think is still alive in Eugene, Oregon. Saul Paul Sirag and Barbara Hanukkah was part of this. Barbara Hanukkah, who was his girlfriend at the time. I got the story from Saul Paul Sirag, so you should talk to Saul Paul about that. I hope he still remembers it.
Okay, we have two hands that are up right now. Also, I think there was a comment that might be shared. Bruce, your hand is up. Why don't you weigh in?
I would like to defer to Mr. Morningstar as a guest, so please feel free to interject, and then I'll go later.
Thank you, Bruce. I wanted to share with you, fellas and lady, a couple of UFO experiences, close encounters I had. In March of 1990, I was doing a solo flight from MacArthur Airport to Albany and Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And I was passed by two Tic Tacs. I didn't call them that then. I called them two egg-shaped UFOs that came out of the fog, low altitude, climbing up. I notified air traffic control at MacArthur that I had traffic on my 10 o'clock and climbing, and they said that they couldn't see them. The strange thing is I was in a TCA, terminal control area, where every aircraft has to have a transponder, which is a radar signal that the airplane sends out with a code so that you can be more easily identified. Instead of being stricken by the radar beam and then bouncing it back, you're actually projecting it. So they said they couldn't see them. They climbed up and passed in front of my nose, the nose of my airplane, my nose too, about 200 feet ahead of me with me closing. And they were just two very beautiful egg-shaped UFOs with the smallest cupola you could ever imagine. And they looked to me like they were tethered. If you've ever been in a glider or been towed by a glider, they keep a common distance because of the tow cable. These two egg-shaped UFOs seemed like they were connected magnetically, and there was no variance or oscillation. If an aircraft is flying in the slipstream of another aircraft, there generally are airwaves that buffet the aircraft, and there's a disparity in the movement. These were locked in. And after they passed me, they accelerated and they crossed Long Island Sound in about 7 seconds. Now, the reason I mention this is that Russell Targ asked whether or not we think that this UFO disclosure, the peekaboo disclosure, as I call it, is a cover-up. I think it is a cover-up, a smokescreen, and trying to get out of the responsibility of having lied to the American people about everything for 80 years. So I don't believe a single thing the US government says about UFOs. And I believe that this is a tactic where they want to absolve themselves of the responsibilities and culpability for having mistreated so many thousands of honest witnesses. But the reason I mention this is that when I saw these craft pass me, they were coming from the region of Republic Airport and making a beeline for Bridgeport. And after I saw them, I said to myself, I wonder if they're heading for Sikorsky, which is the name of the airport, but it's also where the Sikorsky helicopter company is situated over there in Connecticut. Now, with regard to Chantel's question about the fuzziness of UFO photographs, I can tell you that on June 1st, 2019, I had the closest encounter in New York City that I've ever had on 89th Street and Riverside Drive, where a spherical UFO about 40 or 50 feet in diameter rose up alongside a building. And I thought, you know, your brain goes into cognitive dissonance, right? So I'm seeing this huge 50-foot lead-colored sphere rising alongside a building in New York City. My brain said, what am I looking at? A lead balloon in the middle of New York City? It rose about 100 feet above a 15-story building and then began to rotate. Now, here's the important point. when it began to rotate, there was a glimmer of light, like a halo around it. And I expected it to keep spinning like a ball, but when it rotated, it turned into a disc. And then it started to fly horizontally, doing very gentle rocking motions, like waving of the wings. It curved around the monument, Soldiers and Sailors Monument, and then headed off toward New Jersey. 2 months later, I found a video taken on the Verrazano Bridge of exactly the same craft. So New York City is a hotbed of UFO activity. I myself have had 9 experiences at this same location, 89th Street, Riverside Drive, the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. And if you'd like to read about them, they are the top story on UFOdigest.com, UFOdigest.com. At the top, there's a banner. It says video update, and it has some photo facsimiles of the event that I saw. I have had 9 experiences of UFOs, all at the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, all at my Tai Chi class, all witnessed by other students. I believe that the US government is pulling a fast one on us, pretending that 80 years of UFO experiences are in the past, and that only 144 cases that they've studied since 2004 are the valid cases. So I'm very skeptical about anything that's coming out of Washington.
Let me give you my take on that.
Sure.
You could be right, Robert. However,
I could be wrong.
I think that that most of the people in the Pentagon, first of all, they're mostly young. They're what, lieutenants or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know anything, and
I
think they're just incompetent. I think you're giving them too much credit.
I think that the government chooses these people, you know, what we used to call yes men, people who don't look beyond the end of their desks.
Look,
And that's a problem.
The people highest up, there's no one there who understands physics, okay?
Yeah.
So they don't know what's going on. This is basically a physics issue. Everything that Russell Targ and you've been describing, all of that stuff can be explained by physics.
Yes.
Fairly elementary physics. It's not that hard. Hey, by the way, do you see this guy now? Do you see this guy on the chat? Listen to this. Listen to this. It's Baptiste Fricourt, French, says Thor, this guy I was telling you about, who independently came up with the warp drive and the gravitational lensing distortion explanation that I have. This guy, this French guy, says Thor is a contact of mine. He's a German physicist. When he proposed the propulsion by geodesics, which I've been talking about since 10 years ago already, well before Thor, but it's good that Thor independently came up with it. When he proposed propulsion by geodesics, the backlash was so severe with the UFO community trying to find out where he worked and questioning his education that he had to ask to remove the only interview he gave to explain his work and shut off the website. He's still active, and you can contact him on Twitter at UAP Theory. Okay, I thought that was interesting.
I was wondering if I could ask Jack and Russell to talk a little bit more about consciousness. Jack, you mentioned a very intriguing thing about consciousness being localized in the nanotubules. You know, I worked for 50...
Stuart Hameroff. But Stuart Hameroff, he is an anesthesiologist, professor at University of Arizona. In fact, Russ and I have been to his place a couple of times, his conferences, consciousness conferences. And apparently about the 1980s, what he discovered was that we have these microtubule structures. They're subneuronal structures. They're like optical fiber cables. And they're tubes, like cylindrical tubes, and they're tiled, or they're peppered with what are called protein dimers. Protein dimers are like molecules, like my fist.
Yeah, like a pump.
It's just a molecular switch, basically a molecular switch.
Okay. Penrose is very excited about that model.
Yeah, it's all Penrose. This is the Penrose, and okay. So, but what the idea is? Yeah. So the idea is that the way an anesthetic works, the anesthetic molecule gets wedged in like this. Here's it stops the switching function of the protein dimer. So the protein dimer is a quantum, it's like a quantum switch, it's a qubit. And these microtubules have, zillions and zillions of these things. So the idea is that that somehow Hameroff's idea was somehow that consciousness is physically generated at that level, at that microtubule level. In any case, back in the 80s or late 80s, Hameroff took an electron microscope picture of these microtubules over to Intel. And the Intel chip engineers, when they looked at it, they said, "What chip is this? What kind of chip is this?" Okay, it looked like
I wonder if Hameroff ever mentioned seeing the light, because Fritz von Popp also worked. He discovered nanotubules, and he observed a ultraviolet light that was doing the work of regenerating damaged cells. Did Hameroff ever?
Maybe so. I don't claim to be a biologist or know all the details of all that stuff. But here's the point. The point is that using David Bohm's quantum mechanics as updated by a guy in Australia named Roderick Sutherland, very smart guy at the University of Sydney, I claim we now understand that the basic physical mechanism of consciousness is very simple. Once you understand that the quantum wave functions are themselves physically real mental fields. Henry Stapp calls them thought-like fields, but they're not thought-like, they're actually thought. Well, they're proto-thought before the conscious. So what happens is in the Bohm picture of quantum reality, you have these quantum waves or thought, let's call them proto-mental waves. They're actually, when Sir James Jeans in the 1920s, he wrote a popular book called Our Mysterious Universe. This is when quantum mechanics was being invented. And Sir James Jeans said that the universe is now looking more and more like a great thought rather than a great machine. The great machine was the Newtonian clockwork universe, and the great thought were these wave functions. And even if you go back in the history of quantum mechanics, even Niels Bohr himself saw there was like an analogy, he thought it was an analogy between the quantum waves and like mental waves. And if you go to David Bohm, in a book he wrote called Quantum Theory in 1950, when he was at Princeton with Einstein, in chapter 8 of that book, he has a whole chapter showing the analogy of thought to quantum wave functions. Okay, so this is an old idea. It's not Jack Sarfatti's idea. But so the idea is that now, if using the Bohm picture, see in the Bohm picture, thought moves matter. How does mind move matter is easily understood in the Bohm picture. It's what's called the quantum potential is a way of describing this mind field, this quantum wave mind field. And it's easy to show, in fact, that the quantum waves change the motion of particles away from their classical trajectory. So how mind moves matter is easily understood in terms of Bohm's picture of quantum mechanics. Okay, the opposite way, how does consciousness arise? That's not well understood in quantum mechanics, because what happens is, in the original Bohm theory, the mind moves matter. That's the wave functions change the motion of particles of matter, but there's no direct back reaction of those particles back on the wave function. There's a violation of what's called the general action-reaction principle. And you know that can't be right. That's what's called a test particle approximation. So it turns out, and so this is an idea which I had back in the 1990s when we were with Hameroff, and Russell was there at these meetings back in the 1990s. My idea was that there's an extended form of quantum mechanics, just the way there's special relativity and general relativity. Well, the quantum mechanics you taught in schools, let's call that special quantum mechanics, and there's more general quantum mechanics. In the more general quantum mechanics, you have a direct reaction of the particles back on their wave functions. And since the wave functions are mental fields, that back reaction is what our conscious experience is. In other words, it's sort of like an electrical circuit. What can kill you is the voltage difference. The Tesla was standing on these, these giant voltages and let it go through his body. He didn't get electrocuted. So the idea is that what we experience, our minds, Jack Sarfatti talking to you is a giant coherent wave function. I'm a giant pilot wave. Actually, I'm two. I'm coming one from the future, one from the past. That's a detail. But I'm this giant quantum mechanical wave function. It's actually called a Froelich condensate. That's another thing, detail I don't want to get into. And and so are you. You're all these giant wave functions. And so what's happening? I'm talking to you. So sound waves are going from me to your nervous system. Your nervous system is processing the information back down to this microtubule level, and that pattern is then being imprinted on your on your mind field, your coherent mind field, and that changes your experience. That's the qualia. Okay, so that's the basic idea of it, and it turns out this action reaction. Now when you have this, so here's the big thing. This explains remote viewing, because as soon as you have that, then you can prove mathematically. You prove mathematically that with entanglement you could send information through entanglement. In other words, if you have two, let's say like Dean Radin talks about entangled minds, Russell's mind can send direct telepathic information to Jack Sarfatti's mind, and Jack Sarfatti will see a coherent picture. In other words, Russell can draw a picture, okay, and send it telepathically, and Jack Sarfatti can actually perceive that picture because of this action reaction. It turns out. Now it turns out the action reaction was not there. That would not be possible. All you'd see is random noise. This has to do with what's called, in ordinary quantum mechanics, it's called the no broadcasting theorem or the no signaling theorem. In ordinary quantum mechanics, you cannot use entanglement to send information, what's called locally decodable information. You cannot do that. And that was thought to be a proof that paranormal stuff was impossible, except they forgot that that particular version of quantum mechanics does not apply to living matter. It only applies to dead matter. Okay, so the point is that this whole idea of action reaction explains to me conceptually, qualitatively, everything that Russell has said is possible, because they now know entanglement operates across time. It's not just space. Entanglement, you can send a message from the future back to the past, just as Russell says. But it's all now understandable. We understand conceptually that this does not violate any laws of physics once you properly understand what physics really is, which most people don't, including most physicists don't, because they're stuck in a small box that they haven't really.
Jack, I must say that in remote viewing, you do not need a distant mind to send you information. When I sat in our shielded room with Pat Price, Pat Price I have a previously top secret drawing on my wall there people can see, where Price had drawn a crane. Price and I are in a shielded room, and Price is trying to describe what's going on at a Soviet weapons site, but nobody is at that site. There's no friendly Russians sending us that image. What we're told is this is a Soviet site in Siberia. But
but at some point in the future, you're going to find out about it, and that's when the information gets transmitted back.
You're saying that you're saying that the remote viewing is a view of the feedback.
Yes, I'm saying at some point in the future, you're getting this information, and then that information is being sent back to you in the past.
Okay, I've got two hands up here.
But you raise a good point, Russell. Yeah, let me think about that. That's good. I understand what you're saying. I just gave a sufficient. I'm not claiming that every experience has to be with from a future mind to a past mind, but some of them are.
We should talk about that
We have
another
to talk about
time.
that. That's a good point. Yeah, you've raised a good point. We have to analyze that and see, you look at the chain and see, when at some point you all knew this information, right? And that's that. Okay.
I'll give you the short answer. Feedback is not necessary, and we can talk about it another time. I wouldn't like you to build a whole theory saying that precognition or remote viewing works because of the person's feedback in the future, because a lot of data show that people can describe things like they can describe things accurately, but they're killed before anybody knows the answer.
No, that's okay. But at some point in the future, they're going to know the answer.
Somebody, not the perceiver.
Oh, no, I could, wait a minute. I didn't mean to say that it's got to be the same mind sending the information back.
I mean,
And it could be other minds too.
Pat Price described things that were not known until after his death.
Exactly. But the point is, they were known after his death, and then whoever knew them after his death could send that information back to Pat Price.
Yes.
That's okay.
So what you're saying is, in a certain sense, the living Pat Price was able to look into the answer book that would be published 7 years in the future.
Yeah, after his death, of course.
He has access to the future answer book.
Yes.
In life after death research, that's called the super psi hypothesis.
Well, you know what? I think going to give me some money for his.
It's a super psi hypothesis, and people scowl over it because it's inherently not. You can either prove it or disprove it.
No, but that's what I'm claiming is using the Aharonov weak measurement theory. It makes perfect sense. Those people who say that they don't know enough physics. Yeah, given their limited knowledge of physics, then that's the way it looks. But I'm saying that if you really know your physics, you can explain it. It all makes perfect sense. There's nothing you say that cannot be explained by simple physics, I say. Okay.
Okay,
people think differently, just don't understand the physics.
I understand.
I think what we just witnessed here, everybody, is a breakthrough in science that is probably momentous and revolutionary.
I agree with you.
I hate to slow it down, but I do have two. There are two guests out there that two folks that have their hands raised.
Yeah,
so if you all indulge me. Christopher Altman, would you like to make your comment or ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Jack, how you doing?
Okay, who am I talking to? Christopher?
Chris Altman.
Yeah, Chris, right.
Are
you working for
part?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
For who? Not Branson? No, I'm currently part of the Harvard Galileo project as
well.
as
Avi Loeb. Okay, Avi Loeb. What's wrong with that guy?
Yeah, I'm also part of the UAP expeditions, UAPX. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to document technosignatures using multispectral arrays, FLIR, high resolution photography, and we know from experience these things are attracted to nuclear reactors. That's one of the reasons why they're active around nuclear sites for the U.S. Air Force as well as the U.S. Navy's carriers, which are nuclear powered, as well as the submarines are nuclear powered. So we know they're attracted to nuclear type signatures. Do you have any other recommendations that might increase our probability of success in as taking documentation of these things?
Wait, let me ask you a question. Do you know Avi Loeb personally? Have you met him?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the project.
All right, well, tell Avi a message from Jack Sarfati. Why hasn't he given me a phone call?
Okay, I can check with that. Yeah, but we're on a Zoom call just like this.
Okay, here's the thing. Look, what Avi's doing, this is all great. It's all good what you guys are doing and fully support it. But you guys are going randomly. Okay, it's important you collect data, but there's plenty of data already. The point is to try.
UAPX is actually the veterans from the Tic Tac incident. So I'm with UAPX also. We're the veterans from the Tic Tac incident, the USS Nimitz.
Yeah, but you're breaking up. It's not. Would you repeat that slowly. Speak slower.
Right. So I'm also UAPX. UAPX is the veterans from USS Nimitz incident, the Tic Tac incident. Yeah. UAPX is a smaller organization doing the same thing.
Okay, but the point is, all you guys, it's great you're doing that. You're trying to observe things. Were you there that
It's not
time?
random though. We went back to the Catalina Islands.
Yeah, I understand. With Kevin Day, were you out there with Kevin Day? In the
Yeah,
boat?
exactly.
Okay, look, it's great you're doing that. I'm all for that. But you have to have some theoretical understanding of the physics of what's going on to direct your observations. And that's what most of you are lacking. And that's why I'm saying Avi Loeb. Look, Avi Loeb, I'm a little bit pissed at Avi Loeb, okay? You know why? Because he has, what's that guy, Shermer, the debunker, the skeptic, the phony skeptic, Michael Shermer. He hires Michael Shermer. He doesn't even talk to Jack Sarfati. What does that mean? Michael Shermer has no business being involved in that project. Michael Shermer, number one, is not a scientist. He has a low-level master's degree in clinical psychology or something from a California State College. He knows no physics. He's very biased. He has emotional problems because his girlfriend died, something, and he used to be a religious guy, and now he's an atheist because his girlfriend died in an accident. So the guy is unhinged. Michael Shermer's an unhinged guy he's like a grand inquisitor. He attacks people like Russell Targ.
His undergraduate studies were in theology.
Well, whatever it was, but he's an idiot. He's basically an idiot. And why is
he's the enemy of trying to understand what we're doing.
Of course, exactly. So why does Avi Loeb hire such a schmuck to be on his thing and doesn't even talk to Russell Targ, doesn't talk to Jack Sarfati? What is that? You know, I don't like that situation.
Well, I'm talking to you. So here's your chance.
Okay. So the point. Okay. So now, what do you want to know from me, Chris?
Yeah. Okay. So I already asked the question. I posed the question. Also with UAPX, we've already done a couple of expeditions. We went back to the Catalina Islands where the USS Tic Tac incident occurred, and we went with a lot of equipment, and we did multispectral imaging for about a week. So my question to you is, we know they're attracted to nuclear sites and that kind of thing. My question is, do you have any other chances of increasing our probability for success in getting documentation of these things? A way to like summon them, for instance.
Okay, listen, I'm a theoretical physicist. I'm not an observational guy, but I do know a guy in the Italian Navy who does have a lot of information about undersea bases of UFOs. I know him. So if you get in touch with me privately, you have still my email, don't you? Where are you? Are you in?
Yeah.
Where are you located? Where are you physically located?
Right now I'm in East Asia.
Oh, you're in East Asia?
Yeah.
Get to San Francisco.
No. I'm in Asia right now. It's 5 a.m.
Okay, you know where. Okay, the point is this. There's a guy I know in the Italian Navy who does have information that probably you'd be interested in. Just send me an email. I'll put you in touch with my Italian guys, and then they can.
Okay, we can follow up privately then. Yeah, sure.
Privately.
Okay, Bruce, I think you still have your hand up.
Well, yeah, just a couple of observations quickly. Thank you, Chris, for joining and your input also. We thank everybody for participating. A couple of things. Jack, going back to the statement you made, I've collected and read everything I could ever find that exists and is halfway credible about Nikola Tesla's writings, his research, and even though the 79, trunks are missing from his New Yorker hotel room, mysteriously, he made the statement in an interview that he invented nothing, that it came to him at night through what he called the ether. And you made that statement also. And I think this once again reinforces the idea of the intercommunication or interconnectedness of consciousness, for lack of a better term.
And what Russell Targ's been talking about.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating because it now joins all of these disparate areas of research, no matter how crude they've been in the past, in the paranormal, and you use the euphemistic term, but starts to bring them together with some type of coherence, which I think is absolutely a turn in that is a major milestone in just that area of research. And I thank you for bringing that up.
Again, let me repeat. It was George Koopman, the late George Koopman, who was Russell. You met George Koopman, didn't you? Remember him?
No, I'm thinking of shortly before I left the program at SRI, the CIA. We were doing operational things with the CIA that were working very, very well. So he started putting up sheetrock around our laboratory at SRI to compartmentalize the things that were verified by satellite photography. And so basically to compartmentalize our work. And I said, we're working here with people who can focus their attention anywhere on the planet. Why are you cutting up our laboratory with sheetrock? What do you think the sheetrock is going to fill around?
Exactly.
If I may, in another area, I want to go back to what Mr. Morningstar was talking about. I've been a pilot. I spent almost 10 years in cockpit doing aviation documentaries all over the world. And, you know, your points are well taken. Mode C, Mode S is not usually displayed with UFOs by any means. And the other issue with that is, and I had an amazing, I think probably one of, not because it involved me, but one of the most outstanding and well-documented sightings in Clovis, New Mexico, or Cannon Air Force Base in 1977. The ability or the observation, the anecdotal observation of these things winking out and disappearing may have direct implications to, you know, the viewer on the field, on the ground, as it is actually conforms to your theories, Jack, that you know, that it is not a nuts and bolts issue. It is a manifestation or how we perceive it. And I think that that's revelatory too. I mean, thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, these things obviously do not have the flight characteristics, dynamics, propulsion units, or anything else. And I'm sure Christopher, looking at your background, you would agree with that. So I will say no more and pass it on to someone else. Thank you.
Okay,
Let me just add before we on that. There's the 5 observables that Louis Elizondo. Can you put up that slide? The 5 observables. Well, that's what you're referring to. And what I'm claiming is we understand all 5 of them in terms of basic elementary physics, except possibly for the transmedium going through solid matter. I'm not sure about that. So, but we understand at least 4 of the 5 very, very well. Can you get that slide up there?
Bruce, you have
Joe, you have that slide, you know, the 5 observable slide that put off and Elizondo and even Chris Mellon, I believe, showed.
Okay, let me see if I can dig it up here.
Yeah, Galileo also has Chris Mellon and Elizondo on the project too.
Yeah, well, okay, okay. Let me tell you about Chris Mellon. There's a political problem going on here. I got along pretty well with Chris Mellon until we got involved in a political fight during the campaign. As a result, Chris Mellon has an emotional problem with Jack Sarfatti. Okay, so and Michael Sherman has an emotional problem with Jack Sarfatti, and so they are preventing, I think, my communications with people like Avi Loeb, who should be communicating with me, and especially with people in the government who should be communicating with me about these topics. So there's this purely, political issue that's getting in the way of progress. And meantime, the Russians and the Chinese are forging ahead. And I should also say this, that curiously enough, there we go. There we go. All right. Okay, sudden instantaneous acceleration, hypersonic velocity without signatures, low observability, positive lift, all trivially understood conceptually in terms of elementary physics of Albert Einstein and some quantum mechanics. That's what I'm claiming. Okay. So, yeah, so where is Chris? Is Chris Altman still there? Or did he leave?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, well, Chris, do what you can to get tune Avi in that he should be talking to Jack Sarfatti and Keith Wanzer. He should be talking to us at least to get our feedback, get our point of view. He's in a bubble right now. He's just getting information from Michael Sherman and Chris Mellon.
Well, and me.
Well, and you, yeah. Well, okay. Well, I don't know how influential you are with him. You know, how high up are you? All right. So see what you can do to break through that wall of silence of strength that's coming from Project Galileo in regard to what I am doing. And that's
Well, there's also UAPX. UAPX is also, it's only 8 people, but it's they've already had expeditions at the Catalina Islands where the U.S.
yeah, I know.
Tic Tac
Kevin
Tech
Day's a
occurred.
good guy. I know Kevin Day invited on that, but they don't have a. But as far as you don't have the Kevin Day doesn't have the financing in the connections like with Jeff Bezos. That
Yeah, but we do have
Lab having
we have
Harvard
physicists.
University behind him. You know, Harvard University Smithsonian Institute. I mean, you know, this is. But the point is, Vladimir Putin's physicists, they're going ahead. Okay. So the point is this, it's an arms race. It's an arms race that's going on. And my information about the physics of how this all works is taken very seriously by Russia and China. Russia for sure. And also Iran. I can prove that several hundred Iranian scientists and intelligence officers track my work on social networks, specifically LinkedIn in.
Okay, we have.
Oh yeah, Kevin Knuth. Yeah, Kevin Knuth is also, you know, not doing what he should be doing. Kevin Knuth is also a bit of a, you know, a bit of a. Yeah, Kevin Knuth is not doing what he should in regard to communications with Jack Sarfatti and his team. Okay, so see what you can do to smooth this out, Chris. Since you kind of know both of us.
Thanks a lot.
Jonathan Davies.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jack. I'll just comment on that last thing you just said. Then Kevin is actually part of our chat group, so you could smooth it out yourself.
No, but there's no problem. Oh, like Kevin Knuth?
Yeah, he's part of our chat group.
No, he should. Yeah, look, Kevin Knuth. I think Kevin Knuth got angry with John Warner. You know, there's this thing, you know, John Warner the fourth, who is the third cousin of Chris Mellon. They both had the same grandfather, Andrew Mellon. And they're at, I don't know, there's some family feud going on there. And Warner sent some stuff that I think pissed a lot of people off, including Kevin Knuth. I don't know.
I'll let you deal with that one, Jack, with him directly. I've got a question for Russell.
Go ahead.
Russell, when you were SRI, were there any other more secret programs for the remote viewing apart from the ones that you were doing? I know there were DIA, CIA. Were there NRO, things like that as well?
No, we had very wide clearances to everything, and there was, in a certain sense, you're asking me a metaphysical question. You're asking me, were there programs going on that I don't know about? Well, obviously, I think I can't.
Did you have hints about those programs?
To the best of my knowledge, we were at the because we had developed the technology for getting very high reliability, distant information, pre-calculated information. So people really revered us because we knew how to do the trick. And then in 1990. I was asked to train up a group of people at Fort Meade so that they could run their own program. And Joe McMonagle, who's a prodigious remote viewer, was in charge of that psychically. To the best of my knowledge, there is no other secret remote viewing program because it's people have to feel very free and very supported to do remote viewing. So the Soviets had a big problem trying to replicate our work.
I was told basically by Colin Kelleher, he introduced me to somebody who told me that they were part of a different remote viewing program, let's put it that way. And that program was a little bit more on the nasty side, where they were attempting to set fire to people's homes remotely. They were attempting to press buttons, electronic buttons in bunkers, if you like. Have you ever heard anything on that side of things?
There's a CIA program.
I'm not sure which agency it was with.
American program.
They basically said it was a GTS program.
When do you think
it was Sunstreak.
When was this?
I think it was the same time as around the Sunstreak was going on.
I have no knowledge of that.
Yeah.
Jack, I want to ask you,
Jack,
I have a publicity problem with you. You and other people who are writing about quantum physics happily reiterate the idea of the no signaling hypothesis, as though that's baked into the theory. And it would be very bad if no signaling is baked into the theory of non-locality, since signaling is taking place.
Exactly my point. And also we have the physics, Roderick Sutherland has shown exactly what the mathematical theory is that incorporates signaling. It's just,
Is there a way for you to show quantum mechanically or mathematically that the no signaling is not one of the bricks supporting?
Yes, exactly. In fact, Bohm, it's already in Bohm and Hiley's book, The Undivided Universe. They showed the no signaling comes from the assumption that there's a violation of the action-reaction principle. In other words, in order to get no signaling, the quantum mechanical field, information field, acts on matter without any direct back reaction of matter on the quantum information field or on the thought field. Okay, and that's
talking about Rode-Hub-Bohm effect.
What?
A Rode-Hub-Bohm effect.
The what effect?
A Rode-Hub-Bohm effect.
Oh well, no. That's different. Yeah, no, there's no. I mean, no, I'm not talking about a Rode-Hub-Bohm effect. In the Rode-Hub-Bohm effect, you don't have to have action reaction the way I mean it. No, it's what it's like. It's okay. It's like special relativity versus general relativity. In special relativity, the space-time manifold tells particles how to move and what are called geodesics. But a free particle moves in a straight line with a constant speed without any acceleration. That's called a time-like geodesic in modern differential geometry language. Okay, so but in special relativity, there's no direct back reaction of that particle on space-time, and as a result of that, there's no gravity. You cannot explain gravity in special relativity theory, in Einstein's 1905 special relativity theory, and it took Einstein 10 years of struggle to overcome that limitation. That's just like the no signaling theory in ordinary quantum mechanics, okay? Because what you can show is as soon as you have a larger mathematical structure in which the particles are no longer test particles, that is, they become sources, they could react back on space-time, or in this case, react back on the wave function, then you get EPR signaling, you get everything that Russell Targ is talking about. So the answer, let me summarize. The answer is that I had these intuitive ideas back in 1996 when I was with Russell and Hammeroff at these Tucson meetings, but I didn't have all the precise mathematics. It's only in 2015 that Roderick Sutherland, a theoretical physicist at the University of Sydney, that he came up with this very precise, beautiful, what's called Lagrangian formalism, showing everything that I've been talking about in great detail. Okay, so the answer is, since 2015, we understand quite precisely in mathematical terms why it is that what Russell Targ talks about is possible and in fact is a fact that happens.
John Archibald Wheeler wrote in his gravitation book, Wheeler said that the mysteries of physics are going to be explained not through the fields, but through the geometry. So I agree with you to the extent that the data that we see is going to be outside ordinary quantum mechanics, but I think that the explanation is going to be through a more accurate description of the space-time where we reside.
Well, listen, I'm not going to, what I'm claiming is that we have the more accurate description. And it involves both. It involves space-time and quantum fields. Yeah, both. What's happening is that structures in space-time directly react back on the quantum wave functions, and that generates consciousness and enables signaling and enables the violation of the no signaling thing, that barrier. What I'm claiming is we understand everything you want is already understood, Russell. It's not that it's not understood yet. We understand. Jack Sarfati understands it, okay, and a few other people working with Jack Sarfati. We understand it, rigorously, in the same sense that I understand anything in physics the way I was taught by Hans Bethe and people like him. Okay?
Well, the data suggests that we misapprehend the nature of what we mean when we say something is distant.
Yeah, well, that's
Because
yeah.
phenomenologically, to the person sitting in the chair, there is no distance.
Yeah, okay, listen, you met, that was all solved already by Oliver Costa de Beauregard from the Institut Henri Poincaré in Paris, who visited you in the 70s.
I remember him well.
Okay, well, then he had it right. We were so stupid.
Well, he is a zigzag model.
Yes, the zigzag explains all that. Well, plus this action, zigzag plus action reaction. Yeah, he had half the story. There's this other little detail. But basically, Costa de Beauregard had the right idea explaining all this. Costa de Beauregard could easily explain backwards in time, precognition and, in terms of a zigzag. It's called local retrocausality. So the answer is it's understood. It's a solved problem. When George Koopman, from the Army and intelligence, who was giving us money back in 1975, when George Koopman said, Jack, the two things the CIA wants to know, what is consciousness? How does that paranormal stuff work? How does the SRI stuff work? And how do flying saucers fly? Now, we understand both problems, and the solution, the theoretical physics solution of both those problems is tightly connected. Mathematically speaking, they're very, very closely connected, like two sides of the same coin. The answer is we understand it now, conceptually. Okay, there's still a lot of engineering we have to do, like to build these things or to make a conscious computer with nanotechnology, quantum dot, artificial neural nets, there's whole kinds of stuff we have to do, but that requires a lot of money. That requires people in the Pentagon, people at DARPA, listening to what I'm trying to tell these idiots, and then we'll get it done. Meantime, the Russians are doing it to the best of their ability. The Russians are already doing it, and no doubt the Chinese are doing it. The Chinese are not fools.
Well, that's what we ask you about first.
Yeah.
Because I ask you if does your fine mind think that the Tic Tacs are coming from an army base at Fort Meade or from the future, and you said, no, they come from the future.
Okay, maybe they're coming from Fort Meade in the future. Well, I think that it's more like to be coming from a Moscow base in the future.
I mean, you got a lot of people here. You have a lot of people here who value what you have to say, and really the biggest. We all think that something like UFOs exist. That nobody's questioning that. We don't know what the hell they are.
No, you don't know what the hell they are. Jack Sarfatti knows what they are. That's
but Jack won't agree on whether or not they're true entities from the future, or whether they could be fooling us as part of somebody's operational program.
No, they can't be fooling us. You know why? Because nobody is that smart in this time. You see, you're imputing. Okay, Russell, you're one of the smartest people around. Okay, they're not smarter than you, and you can't figure it out. Okay, well, you were one of the.
Well, I'm certainly not one of the smartest physicists around. I've a lot of experience.
Yeah, well, you're a physicist too. But the point is, I knew John Wheeler. I knew Richard Feynman directly. I knew Hans Bethe. I was with Werner Heisenberg in Munich at his institute in the 60s. Okay. So I knew I knew David Bohm. Okay. I know Kip Thorne. I know all these guys.
A great blessing.
Yeah. And, so the thing is this, and they're not that smart. They not only that, it's not that they're not that smart, they're not that diabolical. These are all like, sweet, nice guys interested in doing their physics. And nobody in the intelligence agency is that smart in terms of physics. They may be diabolical, but they're not smart. So they couldn't figure this out. They couldn't even conceive of doing this. It's beyond them. Okay. And I have no evidence to the contrary.
Okay,
So the point is that the puppet masters are not people alive now sitting in the Pentagon. They're not military officers. They're not central intelligence officers. Most of those guys are totally clueless, and most of them are young now. The guys in the CIA and the Defense Department who got us into this whole thing, they're all dead now. You know, Andrea Paharich, George Koopman, Harold Chipman, Andrea Paharich, people like that. They're all dead.
Okay,
Okay,
let-
these guys are
Well,
wiped out.
you're right. In my experience with the CIA and DIA, I did not run into any supreme intellect who really blew me away
Exactly.
with his great penetrating wisdom.
Exactly my point.
I don't have a single example.
Exactly. Okay, that's what I'm saying. So it's not, and in Russia, it's the same thing. In China, none of those guys, you know, whoever the puppet masters are an advanced intelligence from our future. They're not here now, but they're time travelers. They're able to influence, you know, they're going back in time because they're creating themselves in what Igor Novikov in Moscow calls self-consistent loops in time. You know, it's like Star Trek 4. Is it Star Trek 4? Yeah. When they go back to San Francisco to save the whales. It's that kind of situation. That's the reality we live in. Okay.
Jack, if I could just jump in here for a second. We have about 15 minutes left. We burned up almost 2 hours and 15 minutes with a great conversation. I appreciate everything everybody's doing. Now, with that being said, I have 2 hands up, and I want to give everybody else out there a chance that if you have a question or a comment for Jack or Russ or anybody else, put your hand up and we'll recognize you. You have about 15 minutes, so make the most of it. Robert Warningstar, you had your hand up. Why don't you go ahead? Then Chris
Yes,
Altman, you're next.
I have a question. Thank you. I have a question for Russell Targ. Russell, in all your experiences in remote viewing, did you ever make contact with a non-human intelligence? Or how many times?
Good question.
I'm hesitant, not that I could testify to. I had an experience. I did not have I got scared a couple of times by being in a place where I really oughtn't to be. Once within a Soviet computer, Hella Hammond and I were visiting Brezhnev's office of the Kremlin psychically, and I felt that I was being surveilled upon.
Yes.
And once in a deliberate out-of-body experience, our friend Pat Price was very involved, interested in UFOs. I went searching at night for a UFO and found one, and I was prowling around inside. And again, I felt surveilled upon as though I was in danger. My experience regarding entities is they make me feel like I'm in danger. So that may not be very exciting, but that's all I have to offer.
Well, thank you, because I have had some experiences with non-human intelligences, and it can be frightening. I was talking specifically in terms of aliens who do drop in every once in a while. I think I'd like to continue this conversation with you offline when we have time. Thank you.
You can call me. I'm available. Call me anytime.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Christopher Altman, I believe you're up next.
I just had a quick question for either Russ or Jack, and was wondering how Edwin may fit into the program.
Well, Ed May is an experimental physicist, very competent, came to our program about 5 years into the program, supported himself for a few years and then became part of the program. Hal, I left in 82, Hal left in 85, and that left Ed May as the last physicist standing. The SRI wanted to close the program, and Ed then, with his sponsors' support, moved from SRI to SAIC, and he then ran the program for another decade.
Was Mark Pessis involved in that? Do you know Mark Pessis, a friend of Ron Pandolfi?
No.
You don't know.
I don't know. I know Pandolfi from A Voice in the Background, but
Yeah.
I never dealt with him.
Okay, because Pestis is at SAIC or was at SAIC.
Our program was basically sabotaged by the religious forces at
Yeah,
the Pentagon at CIA.
exactly what I'm
For
talking
the
about.
forces of Jesus thought we were not holy enough.
Yeah. Is there another question?
William,
Yes,
yeah,
I have a
go ahead.
question, Jack, Dr. Jack. What is your perception of crop circles and how it ties into consciousness, number one, and number two, the physical reality of these crop circles? There's obviously physical properties going on inside these crop circles.
I don't know much about the details of the inside of the biology of the, of the crop circles, the wheat, whatever, those plants are. But they could be understood as simply some kind of space weapon that's being tested, and they're fooling around with us. I mean, it's some kind of a directed energy weapon coming from a satellite in space, or it could be coming from a UFO.
They seem to be trying to tell us something because there's a mathematical, geometric
I agree.
message in these things.
Very
And there's
interesting.
also a historical message in them because they show historical elements.
Yes. I agree. So I don't know, but making them is not that hard to imagine. From a directed energy weapon out in space, doing that.
Well, they've seen UFOs in the area of these things. That's why.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I'm not an expert. Yeah, there was this guy, Dan Smith, who was investigating all that. He worked with Ron Pandolfi. Yeah, there's a lot of.
How's he doing? Is he still around?
Dan, I think he's still around. I'm not sure. That's good question. He's still around. Yeah.
I have a general question for everyone. There was a theory that I've heard that perhaps the International Geophysical Year was more than just what it was presented back in the 1950s, 57 through 58. And there are 100 and some nuclear tests. This goes back to the comment that was made about UFOs being drawn to nuclear
a lot of
and everything else. Is there a possibility that perhaps this was a plan of drawing out the phenomenon so that it could be adequately studied by 12,000 scientists, engineers, and physicists around the world? I mean, the 57, we had October of 57 was the launch of Sputnik. And of course, throughout 58, when the International Geophysical Year happened, all this stuff was going on.
Yeah, let me tell you, no, because those were I don't think so. Let me tell you why. Because I was around then. I was an undergraduate at Cornell. And, the understanding of Einstein's general theory of relativity in the 1950s was very, very primitive. Hardly anybody understood it. There was a lot of mathematical work being done, but the people doing the mathematics didn't quite understand the physical foundations of it. But here is what is interesting. What is interesting is John Wheeler's role in all this. John Archibald Wheeler from Princeton. John Wheeler, was very important in the Manhattan Project. In fact, Wheeler and Niels Bohr in the 1930s, I think I already mentioned this, they invented the liquid drop theory of nuclear fission. And Wheeler was in charge of the Oak Ridge, refining the uranium isotopes and to get plutonium, all that during the Manhattan Project. And Wheeler was one of the fathers of the hydrogen bomb with Edward Teller. And but the point is, Wheeler was doing nuclear physics, the highest level security clearances, Princeton professor, and I think he's the cousin of General Earl Wheeler, who was, chief of the Air Force and, I think maybe head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at one point. This is when Truman's president, and I think it's Eisenhower. But here's the point. The point is suddenly, in 1953, the same year of my direct contact with the Tic Tac from the future conscious computer, right? Wheeler suddenly leaves nuclear physics, drops all his nuclear physics work and all his hydrogen bomb work, okay? and starts concentrating on the theory of gravitation and general relativity. Partly because in 53, Einstein was still alive. Einstein had 2 or 3 more years to live. And maybe he also wanted to take advantage of, picking Einstein's brain. But I think the reason, this is my speculation, like an informed guess. The reason Wheeler switched was he was asked to switch probably by Earl Wheeler, his cousin from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, because of Roswell, because of 1947 and all the UFO stuff. And that's my take on it. I don't have proof of this, but having spent time with Wheeler and all this stuff, and Kip Thorne and all these guys back in the 60s, and Richard Feynman, that's my understanding. That's my best guess as to why he suddenly switched, because it was Wheeler who changed everything. It was because of Wheeler's influence. Wheeler stood. Kip Thorne was a student. They worked with Feynman. Wheeler is what made a revolution in general relativity to the invention of black holes and all the modern stuff that we have today. And everything I'm doing could not have been done unless John Wheeler did what he did. Okay, so it's a big revolution in the physical understanding of general relativity because Wheeler's switching from nuclear physics bomb work to general relativity. And I think that was triggered by the UFO phenomenon.
Okay,
Does
thanks,
Kip
Jack.
Thorne think about UFOs?
I don't think he looks, I don't know. I mean, Kip Thorne, he's retired. I mean, he's busy making movies like Interstellar. Oh, but Kip Thorne does have, he does have time travel from the future through the wormhole. That's the whole movie Interstellar. It's everything I'm talking about. He has that. Okay.
Okay.
And, I mean, so I helped Kip Thorne. Okay. I helped when Kip Thorne finished his PhD with John Wheeler. Okay. And came to Caltech as a young, his first only job at Caltech. I was with Richard Feynman, and Richard Feynman's, bug. He had this Volkswagen van, and we helped Kip Thorne move into his house, moving the cartons, stuff like that. This is back in 1966 and 1967. So, I don't know what Kip Thorne thinks, but I'll tell you one thing: everything Kip Thorne's doing, I use. Is very useful to me as tools. Everything he's doing, in numerical relativity, and he has this new physical picture with tendexes and vortexes, ways of picturing, space-time is sort of like Faraday lines of electrical force type picture. That's all very useful stuff. It'll be very useful for warp drive metric engineering physics. So what Kip Thorne's doing is very useful. Whether Kip Thorne himself knows about the implications, I don't know, but I do know this. Kip Thorne, was a Mormon, and the Mormon had many wives and many children. Well, Kip Thorne has many students who got PhDs under him. He's prolific, like the Mormons are with children. He is a Mormon. And I do know this. Kip Thorne's students run the Department of Energy. They run the science part of the Pentagon. Okay. So Kip Thorne maybe does have classified information. Maybe he does know. I wouldn't be surprised. But I know a bunch of his students who do run things. So I should say something this. I said about people, actually Kip Thorne's students are not stupid. And if anybody knows what's really going on inside the government, you just look and see who got their PhDs under Kip Thorne at Caltech and where are they now in the government. And those are the people you should look at. Okay,
Maybe you could take that as a research project.
No, not me, but somebody, some investigative journalists, should do that. And then that'll be very interesting information.
Okay, we got about 5 minutes. If there's anybody, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Can I just ask one more question? I apologize for asking so many questions, guys, take everyone's time.
Go ahead.
I just want to know what you think about the work with Gary Nolan and Jack Valet. I mean, Gary's also been working with Kit Green, doing the brain MRI scans on experiences and pilots, etc. What do you think on that? What if this is us from the future, Jack? Why would they be altering our brains?
Why?
Why?
What do you mean why? In order
why would they be altering our
brains? I know they altered my brain. All I know, my brain's been altered, right?
Yeah.
And when you see the physics I'm getting is from them. I'm not. I'm very humble. I'm only the messenger.
How about you talk about the quickly then about the metal side of things? I mean, that actually supports you in a way. The Gary Nolan paper that came out yesterday.
I don't know this. Who's Gary? I don't know Gary Nolan. This is news to me. So send me that information.
Yeah,
he's a Stanford geneticist. Yeah.
He's a what?
Stanford geneticist working with Kit Green. He's got an experimental research project to study experiencers. They've done MRI and DNA.
Oh, okay. I didn't know about that. That's good. Yeah, this is all good stuff. Well, they should study me.
He's been working on metametals as well. He's just been
doing that metamaterial. Wait,
yes.
Metamaterial?
Yes.
He's done materials analysis with Jacques Vallée.
Wait. Jacques Vallée doesn't know any physics, really. What is that? And Jacques Vallée's been a real bastard with me. I introduced Jacques Vallée to the movie people. He got involved with Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and he never lifted a finger to help me when I could have used his help. And he's still not helping me. He's very nasty to me, Jacques Vallée. He doesn't want to hear from Jack Sarfati. I don't know why. So there's some weird going on there. Yeah, but I'm still quite friendly with Kit Green, so I don't know. Ask them what's going on. That's good point. Jacques Vallée, though, he's a venture capitalist. He has money, and what's he doing? As far as I know, his knowledge of physics is very limited. He was an observational astronomer 50 years ago. He doesn't know this kind of metamaterial physics. I mean, Eric Davis might know some. So, what's he doing with metamaterials? And neither Kit Green's a medical guy. He doesn't know metamaterials. So
Jacques Vallée has basically been paying the bills, and he's got Gary Nolan to do the work on the metamaterials. And they brought the paper out yesterday. I'll send you the paper.
But you said Gary Nolan was a geneticist. He's not a physicist. So how could he be working on metamaterials? Something doesn't compute. It doesn't make sense to me, but I don't have all the information. So
Jacques Vallée has a prodigious understanding of 100 years of UFO sightings.
Yes, he's good about that. Yes,
what the UFOs do, what people's experiences are.
Yes.
So he would be the person. If you have observational questions about what do UFOs want, what do they do, Vallée would be able to help you.
Exactly. But it's funny, he hasn't questioned me about my experiences.
I'll jump out now anyway, guys. Thank you ever so much for answering my questions.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone. Thank you for a very enlightening show. It's been entertaining and informative. I want to thank everybody in the audience for being here, and hopefully you all got something out of this. Jack, thank you again. Russ, it was a pleasure meeting you for the first time.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Excellent. Also, the panel, I want to thank Nick. I want to thank Robert, Bruce, Chantel, everybody. Thank you for being here today. I will have this uploaded to the YouTube site. If I have your email, you'll be notified. You can get to it by going to my website. And well, thank you. I look forward to seeing you all next month.
Baptiste, I know we didn't get you in there real quick. If you want to reach out to Joe or myself after the fact, maybe we can assist you in following up, and anybody else that wants to follow up. Thank you all for joining us. It's been incredibly informative. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay.
Betsy, see it out there.
I had the best time. Thank you.
Well, I have a comment for the management if there's somebody left to talk to.
Sure.
Yes.
I would not be here if I didn't happen to notice a link from Jack Sarfatti this morning as I was having my coffee about 1 hour before airtime. That was my only indication that this event was taking place. So I always looked and see what Jack has to say, and I saw that this was Zoom, so I just thought I would link on, see what Jack has to say. I'm very happy to participate, but I was quite surprised to find myself a significant participator in the program.
We thank you for that. We hope we didn't impose on you in that regard, but
no, please give me some. If you do this again, I'm very happy to be here with you. So if Russell, this happens again next month, please send me an email.
I will.
Give me
Absolutely, sir.
give me more than an hour's notice. I
Yeah.
mean, you're lucky you're lucky I'm dressed.
We will do that, sir.
Russell,
Thank you.
I do have your email address, so you will be added.
Thank you very
Anybody
much.
else that wants to be added to the emailing, please send it to my email address. It's in the mail emails that were sent out. You should be able to find me, my website, www.millenniumoss.com. So thank you all for being here. Look forward to seeing you all again.
So bye-bye.
Everybody
Bye.
be safe. Happy
Thank you,
holidays
Joe.
to you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you,
Bye,
Bruce.
Bill.
Thank you, Joseph.
All the best.